video, Lee. Just want to cover off a few really basic points. Just what I try and do is either questions that I get asked or questions that I see on the pages, the forums, in the general community. I'm going to try and address them every week in a Tech Tuesday, and this week it's around budget rifles. And I've actually got a few examples of rifles that I've got that are bases that I'm using, alongside a really cheap scope that I've used for a while. If it's a budget build, if I'm not going to splash a load of cash on it, these are just some simple items to get you going until you decide to either hit up the high-end rifles like your SRSs, and some of the nice SRS rifles. But yeah, I've got to wait for a few more people to come in, and yeah, I'll start going through them. So while we're waiting for some more people, feel free to ping any questions over. Evening, Mark. How are you doing? Not spoke to you in a while. Yeah, Paul. A lot of people are asking why do some people use Tokyo Maru VSR 10, and others will use a Cyma CM 701 or the Well MB series. So I just want to go through some of the reasons, sort of the pros and the cons of what the rifles have, alongside simple things that you can do without spending any money. And yeah, just some simple tips to give you started. I know, conscious that not everyone can just go buy a rifle and upgrade it. As far as I know, no one other than myself is offering pre-upgraded rifles out of the box. Not ones to any reasonable standard anyway. But obviously not everyone can afford that, so I thought I'd go through the cheap rifles that you can get that work out of the box most of the time. You can get the lemon, same as anything you buy. But yeah, now we've got a few people in. I suppose I'll start. Excuse me, I'm not feeling too great today. So to my right, you guys won't be able to see it, but evening, Sabo. To my right, I've got three rifles. So the first rifle I've got is the Cyma CM 701. Now this is a bog standard VSR 10 looking rifle. The only difference aesthetically is you might be able to see it, but the stock on these is actually really good. They've got a nice texture to them. They're not as shiny as your standard JG Bar 10 or Tokyo Maru VSR 10. The texturing is nice on them. They're a lot weightier. They do have an odd proprietary rail. And when I say proprietary, if you buy some of the fixed mount rails, fixed mount scopes, so where it's one solid base, the sizing between the rails, or between the cutouts and the rail, is slightly off. So if you've got one where the mounting points are fixed, you'll find that you might not be able to mount it on this. Normal scope rings are absolutely fine, and you can swap this rail out for a standard rail. I think Action Armies sell them separately. But otherwise, this is, at the moment, one of my go-to bases, purely because it's not massively expensive. It's slightly cheaper than a JG Bar 10, slightly more expensive than the Well MBO 3 series, but everything in it, quality-wise, is absolutely fine. And I've built a lot of these, and they are 100% Tokyo Maru compatible. Whether that's Action Army, Laylax, Edgy, Springer Custom, Airsoft Pro, any of them, Maple Leaf. I've yet to find something that hasn't fit in this, besides the bull trig. But that's not so much because of the rifle, it's just because of the way the bull trig fits in here. And out the box, these are usually pretty close to 500 FPS. They're rarely over. They're usually at the 480, 470 to 490 mark, I'd say. Most of the time they come and they're reasonably put together, so you don't have to do too much tinkering. You can just pick one of these up and go to the field, and it is skirmishable, but you'll be at the lower end of being able to skirmish in terms of sniping. The bolt pull on them is pretty smooth. There's no grating. It's not the smoothest, and you can feel it catching on what I would guess is the guide rings. But it is pretty smooth. trigger's nice and smooth. The mags on these fall out. So just to demonstrate that, they drop out, no having to dig in there to get them out. The barrel is 605, if memory serves. I've actually checked one for a while. They're your standard brass barrel with the crowning on them is reasonable. You can give them a lap or a polish if you are short on funds and you are going to be using it a while. But out of the box they're fine. You can do some simple mods to the hop up and to the piston and things. But otherwise they're a good rifle out of the box. I am going to do on my YouTube channel, so make sure you subscribe to the YouTube, because I am going to do an entire build just on DIY mods. So I won't change anything out, I will only modify or add to existing things, and I'll probably send that up to one of the Sniper Ops guys to try. And Kicking Mustang's got a really nice range, so I might send it up to him and do some side-by-sides of a cheap DIY modded VSR versus a normal VSR and SRS and some other things. That's pretty much it for this in terms of the pros and cons. The only issue that I've heard some people have is that the stock can be brittle. So if you bang it on something where it takes a drop, apparently it's prone to cracking, and you can sometimes see the seam. I don't know whether you'll be able to. I've yet to experience that, but I have heard it a number of times. Benefit when you buy these, oddly enough, from UK retailers, you only seem to get one mag with these, and when you buy from outside of the UK, you'll generally find that these will come with 3 mags. So if you do buy one and it only comes with 1 mag, there's a good chance they've just been taken out, and I would query it. Because I've bought some from the UK and some from EU, and yeah, one comes with 1 mag and the others come with 3. But that's the middle of the budget rifles. The next one is the cheapest rifle, and this is the Well MBO3 rifle. What's Paul saying? Paul's saying he loves the Cyma stock over the TM and JG. I do. I think the Cyma stock is brilliant. It's really nice to work with if you're if you've got to bore out the stock because you're using a reliquary receiver. The material tends to sand and cut well rather than fracturing and chipping, which is what these sort of plastic ones, like on the Well, the JG and the TM do. So this is the Well MBO3. Same sort of stock as the Tokyo Maru, non-textured, just plastic. Nothing fancy. The trigger on these is very spongy, very tough. It isn't as soft as the Cyma. Yeah, it's quiet. The stocks, because they are that much more solid, you do get less echo and reverb out of them. And these do have standard scope rails on, so as I mentioned earlier on the Cyma, if you get the fixed mounts, these generally are absolutely fine and are generally good spec. Few differences between this and the Cyma and a normal TM, or a normal VSR, sorry, is they come with a rail under here, and the outer and inner barrel on these is considerably longer than a stock VSR. And what I mean by that is a standard VSR 10 and VSR 10 based clones are all around 428mm, and the outer barrel is 470, I think, whereas this takes a 510mm inner, which is a little bit of a pain because not every VSR cut barrel comes in that length. They're usually 303, 428, 500. I think Maple Leaf do some 510s in their 602 steel variants, and 550mm. They're the most common sizes, so sometimes you might find you're going to get one that's a little bit short, which means you do have to brace it at the end because it won't sit in the cutout and the end cap like the stock one does. For a while I avoided these because I had a run-in with about 4 of them, near enough four over the course of about 10 weeks, where you could look at a screw and it would strip. Whether it was the rail screw, the main receiver screws, and specifically the trigger screws. Now the last couple I've had have been absolutely fine. No stripping issues whatsoever. So I don't know if they've changed something or the QC is a lot better. So for that reason, I'm going to go back on what I used to say and start recommending these again. If I see any more issues, I will retract that statement. But for the moment, they do seem to have sorted out the QC. And yeah, they're good rifles. Again, they come out at circa 480 FPS. These do tend to be thrown together though, in terms of you will generally have to strip one of these down and give it a clean and realign the bucking before you can do anything else. Whereas the Cyma, they're generally put together well, so you don't necessarily have to strip it before you use it. Again, they're good rifles. They're about £30, £40 cheaper than the Cyma CM 701. And someone's asked, do they take VSR 10 mags? Yes, they all do. And they all come with 3 mags. So the Well MB03 that I got came with 3. The Cyma CM 701 did, and the other Well MB rifle that I've got did too. One good thing about the Well is this one, I've changed nothing, but because I've had issues with the last ones, I did a quick test to see how well these screws were going to last, and they seemed fine. But I did some very, very basic mods on this, and this is at 500 FPS, 480, 490. Stock parts, just a few mods. Easy bolt pull. Very smooth. That's 45 degree with a plastic spring guide, plastic piston, and that is very smooth. And that's reason that is the QC is good in terms of how everything in the trigger is spaced. So if you are going to keep this stock and you're going to use the 45 degree trigger, and you're just going to go for the Laylax 45 degree piston and spring guide, which if you're not going to spend a lot, the 45 route is fine, and the trigger in these generally aren't too bad. If you're not being silly with them, if you're keeping them at a reasonable 500-ish FPS, they're generally going to be alright for a while, and you can just replace the sears for £40, £45 should they go. Got these questions again. Yeah, Lee, literally, I was working on 4 or 5 people's guns, and they all sent me well rifles. 2 of them sent me well rifles, sorry, and 2 people said, oh, can you purchase them and work on them? And they were terrible. The only rifles that I've worked on that were worse than them is the recent JG Bar 10s, which I outright will not use anymore. They have just become so inconsistent, it's not worth it. It's a £150 gamble that for me, I'd rather get the Cyma or get the Well. So on an absolute budget, these are fine. The cylinders on these, I forgot to mention it on the Cyma, are crimped with 1 pin. So they're sturdier than the Cyma cylinder, which is crimped. And I'll try and get it in camera for you, but crimped is basically these here, where they crimp the external face of the cylinder to the bolt handle. Well, not the bolt handle, sorry, the lug that goes in. But they have also put I'll do it this side. They have also put a pin in. So the cylinder on these will actually last at 500 for quite some time. And the Cyma ones last as well, but my concern with the Cyma is that it is just crimped. There's no supporting rod or pin going through at all. Lee Taylor Moore's asking, evening sir, how are you? What inner barrel would you recommend for the Ares Striker? I would suggest, if you want to keep the look of the rifle and use the stock outer barrel, then I would suggest a 601 or a Crazy Jet. And the reason being is the Crazy Jet is slightly wider, but because of the way the air slows down at the end, they can increase dual creep, and the Striker doesn't dual creep very well at all. In fact, on heavy ammo with a stock setup, because of the small cylinder, it does struggle to keep duals on heavy ammo. So where in some rifles you'd go for a wider bore, or I certainly would if I'm building a long range rifle, in the Striker, if you're keeping the 500 or 550mm in a barrel, either go for the edgy 601 dual bore, which goes, it essentially starts at 601, 605 and tapers down to 601. That allows air to build up, accelerate behind the BB, maintain its momentum, and will help keep joules when you're using 4.5s. Or, as I said, the Crazy Jet. Alternatively, you can do the trend that I seem to have started, which is cut the outer barrel down to 300mm. And that way you can use the readily available G-spec length barrels, 601 Action Army, 603, Edgy, etc., Laylax, or Bespoke have sort of run with that idea and they've got their own outer barrels now. Can't remember off the top of my head how much they are. The benefit of their barrels is that they are threaded, so you'd be able to use counterclockwise 14mm suppressors. But the stock barrels aren't too bad on the Ares generally. Well, not for a £175, £150 gun. So, sort of final point on the well is the hop arm on this, and the screw that goes to the hop arm is very, very flimsy. And these do have a habit of breaking off when you're adjusting them, and quite quickly as well. I've had it happen within 100 shots. I've sort of slightly adjusted it and I realised it's gone completely slack and the screw is gone. You can get round it by using a slightly wider screw, or if you're going to upgrade, you can do the TDC mod or get an Action Army chamber. But overall, they're fine. They're a good rifle. Quality-wise, for me, the Cyma is worth the extra money. But at the same time, if you're going to stick with a 45-degree route, these aren't bad because of the trigger on them isn't, as I said, that's quite a smooth bolt pull for such a high FPS rifle. And with a few mods, like that is really smooth for a stock gun with just a stripper clean and the usual other little bits that I do to get them that smooth. And the final rifle, which is an interesting one. I had one years ago and I sold it and I wish I never did. And then I saw them in stock somewhere else, so I grabbed one. This is, Mark Hutchins is saying that he had the dual bore and swapped it out to the 303. The 30, because of, and I've covered this on my blog, so if any of you see my early posts from around, I think it was this time last year, a certain YouTuber had said that the striker was a waste of time essentially and that it wouldn't shoot far. And me being me took that as a bit of a challenge. So I worked on one, did a lot of mods, looking into the science of how BB guns shoot, how do they work, what gives them the range, what affects the range and the accuracy, and in doing so, working out what the cylinder length was versus the barrel that was in it, versus what should be used. I built a rifle for less than £200 that was hitting 80-90 metres, and that was because I matched the cylinder to the inner barrel, and that seems to work. And on the striker, because it's got a small barrel, a small cylinder, the 303 seems to be the perfect length. A 500 FPS spring on a stock Ares barrel, stock length, will get you, I think I measured it at 2.3 joules and a 2, swapping out a spring to an M150, M160 and changing nothing else. When you go to 4.5s, you're limited to maybe 2 joules, 2.1. So it's not bad, but obviously you want to be as efficient as you can and get as close to that 2.3 mark as possible. And using the same sort of setup, but just reducing the amount of barrel that BB's got to go down and the amount of air that you've got to use, the 303mm barrels seem to work wonders. I mean, Mark's gun is outstanding. It's a tiny little thing. He's got the short outer barrel with a suppressor on it, G-spec, and it works phenomenally well. And it's a simple mod for a very cheap gun. But I'm getting distracted, so I'll answer the rest of the questions in a minute. But this rifle, you don't see many of them, is a Well MB11. So VSR based, comes with a nice fluted barrel and a really cool looking muzzle brake. Again, it comes with the rail on the underside, but otherwise it is essentially just a normal Well MB03 in terms of trigger, cylinder and everything else. They're a little bit more expensive, but you're paying for that unusual stock, which has got an adjustable cheek riser, and you're paying for the the fluted barrel and muzzle brake. Again, performance-wise, these are all pretty much, they're based on the same gun. The benefit of this, beyond the stock, which I think, in my opinion, is pretty cool, and actually, the stock is quite solid in terms of how much material is in it. So it's quite quiet, even without doing any mods, it's pretty quiet. Where was I going with that? The barrel length on these is also 428, which is good. So that's a standard, a pretty common VSR barrel. That's the standard size of a TM VSR 10 Pro. Bolt pull, again on a stock gun, pretty smooth. Cylinders exactly the same as the Well MB03, so crimped with one supporting pin. Not as smooth going in, but I've done nothing with this one. That's fine for a stock gun. It hasn't had the little tinker that I did with the MB03. But I really like these. I don't know if it's the stock. I'm looking forward to painting this. I had bought all of these to move on as projects, but it's very comfortable. It's very good to shoulder. It's very pointable. It's light, and I think it's going to have a good performance. The only thing I'm conscious of, and I'm basing this on the Well MB010, which is the same gun with a very loosely looking SV98 stock in it, is because of the way they fluted this barrel, I couldn't fit an Action Army hop-up chamber in the last one I had. They may have since changed that. I know quite a few people had a similar issue. So if you're going to try and upgrade the hop chamber, you are going to have to either get this bored out a little bit more, or get someone to turn down the outer diameter of the Action Army chamber. But these are good. I like them. I think they're great for the price. Again, these are probably on par with, or a little bit more expensive than the Cyma CM 701, but they've worked well. Everything else in them besides the hop unit, which is questionable, is VSR compatible. The cylinders on the Well series are slight, if memory serves, they're slightly smaller than a standard Tokyo Marui or the CM 701, and by that I mean I think the diameter is usually 23 mil, 22.5, and I think these are about a half mil difference. So if you swap the cylinder out or use different pistons, sometimes you might have to do a bit of sanding. If it's the cylinder that's tight, just sand the two guide rings, literally just with some really high grit sandpaper, really fine, and just widen them out slightly, because sometimes you might find that if you put in, let's say, a maple leaf stainless steel cylinder or an Action Army, you might just feel that there's just a little bit of resistance when you're pulling back, whereas it should be quite smooth, and you can hear it as well. And whereas these, there's not a lot of resistance, besides when you close the handle down. So that's the quick run through of them, of what I would recommend, hence why I've got some. But there are a few rifles that I openly would not suggest to people at the moment. And the reason for that, the rifles that I currently am staying away from, and anyone asks me, I'd say the same thing, is the JG Bar 10s have died. The QC on them has got so bad that I would comfortably say 4 out of 5 of them will strip any screw you're touching in a takedown. They are that bad. The barrels have come bent, the stocks have come cracked. They're not as good as the other clones, which is odd, because it used to be the JG Bar 10 was a solid platform. And if you were doing an upgrade, you were going Tokyo Marui, just because the externals were supposed to be a little bit better and the QC was a bit better. But most people would go to the JG, save themselves £100, and have a good solid rifle with really strong cylinders at the time as well. Whereas the JGs now, it's really hit and miss. I've had them turn out with brass barrels, with aluminium barrels. I've had them turn out with metal hops, plastic hops, crimped cylinders, pin cylinders. Everything seems to be slightly off spec. Everything's just rounding. Hot rubbers are on at 90-degree slants, so they're not even installed correctly. And for the price of them, I think they've crept back up to £150 again. So for me, I'd rather buy 2 CM701s for that price, or a couple of Well MB03s. The FN SPR, the Classic Army SPR as well, they're 50-50s. If you get a good one, they're fine. They take all the same parts as a VSR, The hop-up block on them is in a slightly different position, just by a few mil. So that means that with the latest batch in the last 18 months, you'll notice that you can't just drop a Tokyo Marui into them, just because the hop chamber doesn't sit right and the receiver sits slightly off. So if you've got a bit of time and patience, the FN SPR is another good platform, and the stock that it comes with is nice. They have got, I think I've got one here. Actually, I have got one here. So these are the stocks that the FN SPR come in, which are quite nice stocks. I've milled mine out to take a Relicu receiver as part of a build that I was doing. But they're good stocks, pretty sturdy, and the FN SPR is about the same price as a JG, and if I had the choice of the two, I'd probably still go for the SPR, just because I've had so many issues with the JGs. I can see some questions have come in. Have you ever thought of making your own Frankenstein rifles and selling them with your make on the rifle? Yes, David, the reason I have all these rifles is for that reason. I keep getting asked to build rifles for people, and I don't hold the rifles in stock, just because it's a lot of money to outlay and just to have sitting around until someone contacts you and says they want one. But because I've had a lot of interest recently, with people asking for rifles, I've sent 3 or 4 rifles out in the last few weeks back to people. And so because of that, I've decided to try and buy batches of rifles that I will then work on, and then they'll be sold through my site or perhaps through the Airsoft Nation marketplace. And they'll be, I won't sell anything that I wouldn't use personally. I build every rifle as if it was my personal rifle. If I'm not happy with it, I'll contact the customer and say I'm keeping it for another week because I think I can do better. I think you should just take pride in what you do, and for that reason, I generally don't buy, or even in the past, I wouldn't have bought a store-bought, pre-upgraded rifle. I've heard some horror stories of a particular retailer in the UK where people have perhaps bought a Laylax upgraded VSR and found that it's only had half the parts in and then are not installed correctly. So I like to take pride in what I do, and because I enjoy doing it, I don't begrudge having to spend 5-6 hours tuning a rifle. I enjoy it, and that's why I started this blog and start offering it as a service. And yeah, at some point I'd like to build my own rifle from scratch, but that's something for later. Rob Kelly, yep, we've had our discussions on the CA stock. They're both a bit off spec. Mark Prescott, what's your thoughts on the SSG24? Well, having seen one and had one apart and tested it against other rifles, and seen it tested against other rifles, should I say, for me, if it was a cheaper rifle, then it would be fine. If it was sold as an entry-level rifle and everything would last you, then, I don't know, if it was only £300, it would probably be a good rifle. But when it costs you around £460 to £500 to get in the UK, and you go over to the group and every other comment is, my guide rings have broken, my trigger sears have snapped, this has happened, that's happened. I personally don't. It's a Modify M24 that's had a few common sense upgrades put into it, and for me it isn't a great platform. I have yet to see one, despite everyone going on and saying how it shoots 100 metres like a laser. I haven't seen one that's beaten a DIY upgraded VSR. Certainly not an SRS. And for something that dual creeps quite a lot, as I think Mark Hutchins is in the room, he bought a brand new one, 500 FPS, and it was too hot. It couldn't be used. And I think a lot of people have bought them and don't realise that they dual creep quite a lot, well over 2.5, 2.6 joules. So it isn't a rifle that should be sold with an M150 spring here in the UK. And if you'd have done, I say you wouldn't, if I was selling a rifle, I'd have done my research to make sure that I'm not importing an air rifle to someone who's bought an airsoft gun. But for a beginner rifle, if you truly don't want to take it apart, and you get one that doesn't have one of these issues that seems to have cropped up, then I imagine they're fine. But if you've got £500 in your pocket, and you're genuinely interested in building a consistent rifle that will last you, then get a VSR, get someone to build it for you, it'll probably be cheaper, do it yourself and save some money, or buy an SRS. The SRS for me is a great gun. I've got two here. One's mine, one's a shop stock that I'm working on. And they're brilliant rifles. Everything about them has been well thought out, rather than the SSG, which was a bad rifle to start with, the Mod 24, that's then been rebranded and recycled into a rifle that's riddled with more problems than the rifle it was based on. SRS have said, I want to make a gun that does this, this and this. And they researched it for 3-4 years, and then they came out with a gun that did what it said. It's quiet, it's small, QC is on point. They had one issue with a piston. You emailed them with your serial number, you got a new piston. Everything about them was great. I see Jason's just jumped in the room and said SRS all the way. They are. I still believe that an SRS and a VSR shooting at the same dual rating with the same length barrel and the same setup in terms of hop, best you can. Obviously, one's VSR based, one's AEG based. I think the VSR might win in terms of consistency, but I think the SRS has the upper hand in terms of the potential to get those long range shots, just because of the available air volume it's got is phenomenally large. Stock VSR or a standard VSR length cylinder is about 30 cubic centimetres of available air. The SRS is closer to 40. So that's a good, what's that, 60% increase? No, not 60%. About 30-40% increase. Like there's a hell of a lot more available air. So you can certainly get range if you build them well. And they are expensive, but the quality on them is brilliant. Like the stocks are well made. Looking at mine, they just work really, really well, and they're a bullpup. They're comfortable. Like yes, the 16 inches is tiny. That's a really ergonomic weapon. I can see some more come in. Will the SRS fit VSR HPA drop-ins? Currently, no, but Faceless Sniper is working on something pretty cool in terms of getting a Wolverine bolt to fit into an SRS. If you head over to his blog, he's done some really cool things with the SRS, and the bolt is one of them. Kenny saying he's shot a few of the SRSs, he's very impressed. Yep. Lee Taylor was asking, in your opinion, if I had £350, what would you buy? You want good distance. I would say for £350, I'm inclined to say maybe get an A&K M24 and get an extremely good barrel. And the reason being, the A&K 24 has a large cylinder and they work quite well. I've got one shooting reasonably well with nothing spent on it. I changed the bucking and everything else was DIY mods, stock barrel and everything. And they're a £130-40 rifle. For $350 you could buy one of them, you could get yourself an edgy barrel, you could probably get some PDI internals I think now from X-Fire. And that would probably sit you around the 350 mark. And they're nice rifles, the stocks are fine. The way the trigger system works, and the fact that everything in it is pretty much steel, you can, with a few mods and a good few hours, you can get the bolt pull on that smooth. Probably the smoothest bolt pull out of any rifle I've certainly built was the A&K M24 that I'd done. Failing that, you could get a cheap VSR base, the Well MB03, Cyma, the MB11, the MB10, etc. A budget S-trigger from Springer Custom Works, maybe Action Army piston and spring guide. Keep the stock cylinder until it breaks, get yourself a decent barrel, bucking like a modified tan, Sniper 1 hop arm, leave the chamber, save some money, and you'd have a good rifle. You wouldn't have absolutely everything swapped out. You could still later down the line maybe upgrade the cylinder to a maple leaf stainless steel, a Laylax or an Action Army, and what else would you swap? That's it. Maybe get an air brake piston from Laylax, which are really good. They're a lot more expensive than most other pistons, but they do perform well. What else? Someone says, I've got a VSR 10. I've upgraded to the max. I think someone else made it for me. I paid €670, and it's shooting for the right for no reason. 99% of the time, and as much as people really don't like being told it, it comes down to generally two things. First one is the rifle might look straight, your scope might look straight, but you'll find that even if you're turning your rifle just a few degrees when you're holding it, you're basically making the hop tilt, and the hop puts top spin on. So if it's straight, it goes up. But if you cant the rifle left or right, even slightly, at distance, it will carry on curving to the left or to the right. So what you can do is a really, really simple test is put your rifle on a flat surface and get it as level as you can. Put your scope on it, hang something heavy on a string off of a door so that you know it's straight. Put your scope against, look at it if you can get far enough away, and make sure it's level. If you shoot it and everything is level, your rifle, your scope, and it curves, then it's going to be the bucking. But if you do that, you'll find that actually you might be canting the rifle. Guys, bear with me 2 seconds. My dog is throwing an absolute hissy fit. Sorry about that, guys. If you had a £300 budget, what would you build? Probably the A&K, either a cheaper VSR using a budget trigger or the A&K. James Dan said, can you call his name out again? Whose name? Mancraft is working on the SRS. I haven't actually seen anyone with a Mancraft kit in the SRS yet. I know a few people have, but I think a lot of people have found that even if you Mancraft it, actually the performance on spring is still really bloody good. And you don't need to upgrade the SRS really. Maybe the parts that Faceless Sniper does, like the FOW nub, which I've got in both of these. Really good little bit of kit. Fast top chambers there, mainly for convenience more than anything else. And it allows you to use the FOW nub. But otherwise, you don't really have to do a lot to the SRS. You can make it better than it is marginally, but you'll be spending a lot to do it, like getting PDI, barrels, etc. So Mancraft itself is £200-ish, £250 with a regulator, so you can get one, but I don't think you'll really get any kind of gains over keeping it springing and maybe changing a few cheaper parts out. Let's see. Some questions about SRS. Sabo saying the AK-24 is really good. Sabo, I'd be interested to see some of those parts. If you could maybe send me a PM or a link after this, because I think the AK is a great rifle. For how cheap it is as a base gun, it's certainly got a lot of potential. What lovely curtains. Thank you. Jason Kennedy says, hi, I've got an Action Army Teflon cylinder and I had some problems with burrs inside the sear slot. I sanded them down, but I think it's starting to happen again due to wear of either the sear... Oh. How would I fix that? Depending on what you're using in terms of trigger. Action Army triggers, I haven't got one here to show you. Have I got a trigger? Basically, if you're using, I suppose it doesn't matter what series you're using really, basically where the cylinder is, so I'm assuming you're getting burrs along here and tiny little nicks taken out of it. If so, that is because the face and edges of your sear are very, very sharp. Some companies like Springer Custom in their latest S9 trigger have rounded them or radiused them and reduced how sharp the angle is, and it's great because it allows it to ride a lot smoother on these. but with your standard sears from most other companies, they're very, very sharp angles, and what can happen is if you've got some wobble in this, so if the spring guide stopper sits in here, but the cylinder can wiggle left and right, what you'll find is you'll put in a straight edge, a slight cant to another edge when you cock this, and you will just grate it along and slowly take little nicks and stuff out. And then all those filings will get inside your cylinder, and that will gunk it up and cause little tears and rips in your O-ring as well, which will cause inconsistencies, and eventually it will cause it to rip. What else? Show us the SRS you've built. Well, sadly, my one, since I got it, hasn't left its box. It's still in there, but the one I've been building, tinkering with and doing some mods for, is this one, which you would have seen on my last Tech Tuesday. So this is a Gen 1. So the only bits on this that I've changed so far is a 602 stainless steel barrel, just because I wanted to see how well a tight bore did against a wide bore. I have got a PDI 605 coming for my one, so I was going to do a side by side. This has got my air brake prototype piston in it. I've done the usual PTFE mods, tiny little bit of sanding inside the cylinder channel cutout. What else? The bucking on this, the fast hop chamber, FOW nub. This is the stock spring. So on a stock spring, with the air brake slightly tighter barrel and a perfect air seal, this is getting maybe 418 FPS on a 0.2, but it's closer to 2.1, 2.2 joules on a 4.5. And I'll show you how quiet it is with the air brake, even at 2.2 joules. Let me just find the suppressor for it. So I've just got a standard suppressor that I've done nothing to, so that's just got the usual spring and foam in there. This little suppressor came from AK2M4, really cheap, but I quite like the style of it. It does say 5.56mm, so it does need to be painted. But and it's got a machined bolt handle that I got a friend to do for me. But bolt pull's nice and easy, returns easy, and the sound of it, I don't know what that sounds like to you guys. I don't know how well the phone picks it up, but it's a dull thud. It really isn't much more than an MK23, and that's not even shooting anything. That's just dry firing it essentially. That thud goes away when you've got a BB, because at the moment there's nothing resisting this piston going forward, so the air brake's just hitting it at pretty much the same speed. However, when you've got a BB in there, and a heavier BB as well, what you'll find is that the BB puts resistance ever so slightly against the air trying to go past it, and that gives the time for the piston and air brake to slow down, and it makes it really, really bloody quiet. Quieter than what you guys are probably hearing now. So yeah, this will be going back to the shop at some point. I've just had some springs arrive just so I can do a few more tests with it, and I'm hoping the M160 will get this right up to 2.3. It might be a tad over, but it'll bed down in time. But yes, they are pretty quiet anyway, but this one is whisper quiet. I'm very, very happy with it. And even at, that's a 2.1 joules at the moment, this thing is flinging them out there. Like, it is consistent and it flies straight. How much would that SRS set us back with what you've done with it? With one of these, you'd be paying more for the time than the parts. Just because, as much as people think you can chuck everything in a gun and it'll shoot well, you can put £500 worth of parts in a gun craply and it'll shoot the crap, and you can put £100 worth of parts in properly and it'll outshoot it. I think you'd probably be looking at maybe £600, £650 if you opted to go for a PDI barrel. I've used a ZCI because I think they're great budget barrels, but a PDI barrel alone is going to be, oh well, I've got one coming and I think I've just been stung by postage, by tax, sorry, so I think mine's going to cost me £70, £80 just for the barrel, let alone the bucking and the piston. The piston, I haven't got a price on yet. I'm doing a final few tweaks to it, and a few people are in the know, but I haven't shown a single person what I've done to it, just because people do like to nab ideas. But I imagine the piston will be reasonably priced, and it works with both Gen 1 and Gen 2s. Does that price include the rifle? Yeah, the rifles are £500, £480, I think. Yeah, I think about that much. I can't remember. Yeah, I think mine was around that much. But the thing is, once you've upgraded it, that's it. There's nothing left to do on these. You're really looking at piston. I mean, you can get like the Teflon spring guide, which is supposed to make it smoother. You can do some DIY mods to do that yourself. If you don't want to do the DIY mods, you can buy the... Oh, there you go. Jason said £505 for the right-handed covert, which is what this is. This is a Gen 1. Question for you, Jason. Are the Gen 1s going to reduce in price compared to the Gen 2s? Hey Ben, how are you? Unrelated note, Ben, I saw your BMXing video earlier. Completely unrelated. But yeah, it was really good. You're quite good at it, aren't you? I don't know what else to say about the SRS really. They are brilliant rifles. I think if I was at a sniper ops event or maybe a milsim, if I wasn't going to use my Tanaka, which I've finally fixed now, I would be hard pressed to pick between this and my VSR. This is smaller, it's very pointable, it's very, very quiet. Probably about, maybe even quieter than my internally suppressed VSR. The difference between the two is my VSR is very, very consistent in terms of shot placement. And this is pretty consistent in itself. But the VSR, there's something about it that it is, I don't know, it's just the confidence in hitting something with the VSR, for me, is a bit more than the SRS, but that could just be down to the fact I've used a VSR for 10 years. Kenny's asking, what's the difference between a Gen 1 and 2? The Gen 1s, the body is slightly different. The Gen 1s, as good as they are, did come with a very noticeable seam line, and it can be quite rough. And the mag release is very, very stiff on a Gen 1. Like mine's worn in a bit now, but they aren't the easiest. And the way that the BB was feeding, they've changed the trigger so it's more adjustable. They've beefed up the sear. The body's changed. The hop up on the original Gen 1 is adjusted by two little grub screws that you have to put a long thing Allen key in. The benefit of that is the quick change barrel system meant that when you took this out, the hop stayed set. On the Gen 2, and I'll show you, I've got it down here. So with the Gen 2, on the receiver, rather than having small Allen keys, small little grub screws that go straight into the rubber, which is really good because you can adjust left and right as well as applying normal hop. They cleverly gave you, and it's one of those things that you don't know why they didn't do it first time round, but they give you these two nylon screws, and these screw straight into the hop chamber. And what that means is you can quickly adjust the hop up externally without having to carry around a small Allen key, but you do lose the quick change feature. Well, the quick change feature is still there. It's take these out, loosen the one bolt, barrel comes out, but you don't get to keep the hop, because obviously these are what apply the hop. When you take them out, the hop resets. On the Gen 1 and on the original hop chamber, the grub screws are in the chamber, so once it's adjusted, you can comfortably take that barrel out, just clean your rifle, put it back together, and the hop will still be set. And I think it's, for convenience, I think the external grub screws are a really clever idea. But in terms of swapping your barrel out for maintenance, that's equally a good idea. So it really is down to personal preference. But otherwise, the performance-wise are the same. They've changed nothing that will affect the performance of the rifle. It is mainly things that they've had feedback on that have thought, oh, actually, if we do a Gen 2, we could address that. And it is things like the sear, the seam lines on the body, and the external adjusters. So this is probably the third time this has been out of the box. But this is the Gen 2, and you'll notice it has the same seam lines, but they're flat, they're flush to the body, they're not sharp, there's not burrs on there. It's a hell of a lot smoother. Also, the feed tube is slightly different. I don't know whether this was just my Gen 1, but this was quite wobbly on the Gen 1, whereas it's quite sturdy on the Gen 2. The trigger's different as well, in terms of it can be adjusted for trigger weight and also adjusted for trigger pull distance. And yeah, they're nice. Mine was in black just because it was the only stock they had, and I've got a thing about painting rifles recently. If you've been on my Instagram, everything I'm touching, I'm painting. Got a bit of a fixation on painting everything at the moment, so this is going to get painted at some point. But all my time's on the other one at the moment. Ben Smith said, I've had some great results with my trigger and cylinder with your help, mate, and the grinding is 0 to none on the push bolt. Motion is pinky effortless. Yeah, they are. The bolt pull is generally pretty good on them. Sometimes you do get the occasional burr. Just there's a channel inside, so when you're cocking the rifle back and forward, on the cylinder head, there's a small nub which goes into what's essentially a guide channel, so that you basically don't turn the bolt up too much or too little. Even though you can't really do that because of the way that the bolt comes into a cutout. But that sometimes can, until it beds in, can be a bit rough. But you can just basically get what I did. Good old DIY is bit of cloth, bit of T-cut, and just run a bit of T-cut along the guide route, which you'll see when you look into it, just to remove the paint and just to get it to like a polished finish. Although mine's less polished now because it's got dirt and grease and stuff on it. But doing that is an easy way to help with the bolt pull, but otherwise they just bed in really well in time. Lee's asking, can I PM what parts I require to upgrade the SRS? I think I'm going to save and get that. Yeah, of course. Just send me a message after the live, and I will get something across to you. Where to get the parts? Either I can source them. The piston you can only get through. Well, at the moment, there'll be a handful of prototypes that I'll be going out to a few people, and then once I've got the testing back for that, they'll go into production, and they'll be through myself, through SniperMechanic, and there'll be a few key retailers that'll probably have them. But that, again, that's a great part to have in it if you want to get it quiet and work towards getting an ideal dual level. But otherwise, I said that they are great stock guns. Kenny says, even my dog is painted. You've met my dog, Kenny. I'm pretty sure if I tried to paint her, she'd absolutely savage me with her tiny, tiny devil teeth. But actually, in terms of painting, you might have seen it the other day, and I know Kenny's seen this and likes it. But I've got my Tanaka, which was in an original M700 stock, and then it took a tumble when we went to France, and the stock and bipod lug broke. So I managed to get a wood stock for it. And then I saw some real steel Remington stocks online, specifically one that looked like this. And I thought, I'm pretty confident that I can get my Action Army AAC01, essentially an M700 clone, to fit in it. And I did, and it took some time. But there's not many of these out there. Most people have got a standard M700 stock or a wood stock. But this is a real steel Remington stock, with an M700 bedded and fitted into it, and painted in a ATAX Pencotty looking paint job, which works really well. Being a gas rifle, FX bolt pull, nice rifles. But yeah, painting, I don't know why, but maybe it's too much free time, but I've really got into painting everything. But it's got some weight to it. Nope, not at all. It is lighter than the standard M700 stock. The channels are, rather than being... In fact, again, I've got one. So this is an M700 Tanaka stock. If anyone's ever held one of these, as nice and standard looking as they are wide and heavy. And this is all... I don't know what it's made of, but at the back of these is really heavy, and the grip is wide. Like that is a chunky grip. Whereas the wood stock that I've got and the Remington is much thinner and much lighter. Yeah, I'd say it's about, hazard I guess here, probably about 20-30% lighter. Just because it's made out of a thinner polymer, and even, and you can probably see from the handle on it is just so much thinner and narrower. Like you can get your whole hand around that, whereas on the other one, you're there. It's just so much thicker all the way through. Whereas this is just slim. Obviously, it's got a lot of cutouts as well, so it's got a lot of cavities in here, rather than being a solid bed. And yeah, it's really comfortable. It's just really pointable. I'd be confident if this took a tumble off of a cliff, it would be fine. Certainly lasts better than my stock M700 did. My standard M700 stock did. And I wanted to run long mags with this because I'm going to HPA tap it. And my dog's throwing another hissy fit, so bear with. Yeah, ergonomically it is nice. I really like it. The only stock I've got that I prefer more is probably the wood one, which Kenny stole my one, didn't you, Kenny? So I've had to buy another wood stock, which is on my Tanaka. And this is an old school Tanaka PCS with an Action Army wood stock. Really light, solid. Really comfortable to shoulder and fire. I need to strip it down and paint it because obviously this comes off of a painted rifle and now I put it on a wood stock. So I'm going to strip it back, maybe add some weathering and some detailing to it. I mean, it's going to be camoed every time I go to a sniper ops anyway, but it's a very comfortable stock. I was looking at Towering carving for stocks, but I keep hearing not great things about the fitment, and having fitted my M700 into that Remington stock, I really don't want to be having to bed a rifle. It is not a quick or easy thing to do, because you have to get the fitment spot on, otherwise your receiver's going to be canted and you're going to be holding the rifle at God knows what degrees to get the damn thing shooting straight. Kenny's saying, have I stained that? I haven't, but I think the guy that I got it off has, because it might just be because it's on camera, but even I think it does look a little bit darker than yours, which is more of a light beach rosewood colour, whereas that seems to be a bit darker. So we're on the hour, and I'm trying to keep these to an hour just because it takes me a good few hours to render them and get them on YouTube. So is there any final questions before we call it an evening? One thing to note is, and some people kept saying they kept missing notifications to this, is At the end of the video, remember to follow and put notifications on. So if I'm doing a live, whether it's my Tech Tuesdays or my impromptu ones that I sometimes do, you'll get a notification. And also check it out on YouTube. I'm trying to build up the YouTube channel now, and I think I'm up to maybe 250 subs. And considering I've got 2,500-ish people on Facebook, it'd be really good if I can start getting those numbers up. So if you know people that were wanting to watch this and have missed it, or if you think someone's going to find it interesting, or you've got a friend that's about to build a rifle, just point them in this direction. Yes, the subscribe button. Hit that subscribe button. Like, share, do the usual social media stuff. It helps me justify how much time I spend building rifles and doing these. But as always, it's always an absolute pleasure to talk to you all. Lee Taylor Moore says, "Can I have some freebies?" The day I get freebies, I'll start giving other people freebies. But at the moment, I haven't got enough presents to be getting anything yet. But I probably will do a giveaway at some point. I am getting close to some milestones in terms of followers on here, Instagram and YouTube. And I do like to give back. I might even raffle a rifle, I don't know yet. I've got obviously the three here and some others to do. But have a good night, guys, and remember to subscribe and follow to make sure you get the notifications. And I'll speak to you all next week. In the meantime, keep an eye on my Instagram and on my YouTube, because I am going to be doing a DIY guide to VSR rifles in the next week or two. So keep an eye on that. Otherwise, have a good night, guys, and I will speak to you soon.